Early signing day is finally here. Will Auburn be celebrating more of the great holiday of Merry Flipmas?
Listen, put me in the parking lot, with Bears, and I'll go out there and play. It don't matter.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. I want to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college sponsor across the Locked On College channel. Go to linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. John Garcia, recruiting expert himself, joins us. Happy early signing day, John. You wait all year for this day. And we kind of were joking throughout the week, John, about how, I think 2 months ago we were kind of dreading this day. And now all of a sudden throughout the Auburn fan base, there's hope. There's hope of what Hugh Freeze and these guys are doing.
Well, it's one thing to win recruiting battles, right? Look, every big-time Power 5 school is going to win recruiting battles. You're going to accumulate some type of talent. But when you are hitting the ground running as soon as you get hired and you're pulling them from other commitment lists, it hits different. And I think as of this recording, 5 straight high school commitments to Auburn have all been flips. And if 6, 7, 8, whatever the number is going to be come, the end of the day today, if that's going to happen, it's going to be more flips. So it's not just Auburn thrusting itself back into the spotlight. It is pulling away from the theoretical enemy in the process. So I think that has collectively stamped the excitement, the anticipation, not only for signing day, but really just for everything, right? The portal's already buzzing for Auburn. This is going to run into next year. Just kind of the overhaul, the task at hand overall for Hugh Freeze and company. It just seems to be off to about as ideal a start as anyone could have hoped for.
Yeah, it's been outstanding. And you mentioned flips. That seems to be a trend that I think we should expect at least 1 or 2 today. I mean, so far, it's not like you're flipping guys from Western Kentucky or, a Sun Belt school or anything like that. You're flipping guys from Arkansas, from Texas Tech. I mean, some solid programs. Tennessee, and that's one of the hottest programs with a ton of buzz throughout the country, with Sylvester Smith, who really I think is a guy that Auburn fans aren't celebrating enough. I mean, that was a huge win. I mean, Alabama wanted him, Georgia wanted him, Tennessee clearly wanted him. And then this staff went out and got a guy like Sylvester Smith. Is that somebody that Auburn's probably not excited about enough as they should be?
Yeah, I mean, you could view Sylvester as a class headliner in my mind.
Yeah.
I think a couple of factors pulled away from his national profile rising to a super high level. One, early emerger at a small school, obviously Munford, gets hurt after his breakout sophomore season, and then kind of commits to Tennessee while he's still banged up. So even his first commitment didn't have a lot of fanfare because it wasn't fresh off of a great performance or anything like that. So when you flip him, it kind of has that same feel, and he's just at a school where he's had to do everything. So it kind of takes away from being able to shine a spotlight on his true athleticism, his true position projection, which is going to be in the secondary. So yeah, I think there's a lot of circumstantial weirdness around Smith's rise as to why it's not so celebrated. But if you watch the tape, you dig into it, this could be a multi-year starter. And Auburn does this all the time. This is now 3 staffs in a row where you get a guy late, where it's like, oh, okay, we'll see. Same thing we said about Roger McCreary, who was a quarterback, just like Sylvester. Same thing we said about Steven Roberts, who was playing all over the field at Opelika. And these guys, Daniel Thomas from Montgomery, Robert Lee, they all ended up being multi-year starters, contributors, borderline all-conference, McCreary, early round draft pick type guys. This is when Auburn is at its best, these are the late grabs in state that the staff goes out and gets. So Zach Etheridge deserves a ton of credit here, and Auburn as a whole for sticking with Sylvester because, like you said, Tennessee very much wanted to keep him in the class.
Yeah, and we haven't really talked about this on the show, but Zach Etheridge is officially staying. I didn't see a world where he was leaving. I just don't know how you could let that happen, especially with what he's done over the past few weeks with Hugh Freeze. But yeah, Zach Etheridge is officially staying, which is huge. And you talk to kids all the time who just love Zach Etheridge, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're not in position. I mean, we'll see how the end of the day goes, but like if you're going to flip Tony Mitchell from Alabama, Etheridge is the primary reason.
Yeah.
He's right there for Sylvester Smith, as we mentioned. Some of these other players that have jumped on board. Holding on to J.C. Hart has a lot to do with Zach Etheridge. By the way, USC offered him, right? Yeah. Oklahoma State, which has produced high-level defensive backs, offered, try to get a late visit there. So holding off folks is just as big as going out and flipping recruits committed to other schools. So this secondary class, if there's a weakness for Auburn when this dust settles, it will not be in the secondary following recruiting season. And Etheridge obviously is the biggest reason for that.
Yeah, I'm a JC Hart truther. He is my favorite of this class. And so when I saw that he said, okay, hey, USC just offered me, one, I panicked because that's just what I do. But also just like props to this kid, right? I mean, this kid's kind of like not been given as much love as I think he deserved. And I think you're in the same boat, being high on Hart, but him getting a lot of these offers late, I think it kind of adds some pop to his status as a recruit. It's like, yeah, he's a 3-star, whatever, small school, but places, big brands all over college football want this kid now. And I think, props to Auburn for locking him up early.
There's no way USC has ever courted a kid from Lochapoka, right?
No way.
There's no way, right?
Is Lochapoka the opposite of LA? Probably.
Yes, even though you can't spell it without LA. Yeah, 100%. 100% the opposite. And yeah, I think the timing was great for Auburn in this regard, right? Because USC offers during the dead period, no chance he can go out to LA on their dime and check it out. So yeah, that's a problem avoided potentially there, because he was definitely excited to pick up that offer, no doubt.
All right, you mentioned potential flips. You mentioned Tony Mitchell, who's currently committed to Alabama. I want to go over a few names with you, John.
Yes.
As far as who are some guys that Auburn can flip, and we'll get John's thoughts on that in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Bet Online. The bowl season's in full swing. Be sure to get in on the action. Make sure you're ready to go at Bet Online. It's where the game starts. You won't find any more props, odds, or lines than anywhere else at any other corner of the internet. Just search Bet Online. Their mobile app is delightful to use on your smartphones. Be sure to check that out. Bet Online. It's where the game starts. John Garcia, our guest, talking all things Cruton. All right, so some potential names here. Let's start with Tony Mitchell, since you already brought him up. What do you think the likelihood is of Auburn pulling off this flip of a Thompson kid? Auburn's had no luck with Thompson whatsoever, with the exception of Sawyer Pate, the absolute GOAT of walk-on quarterbacks. But what do you think about this? Obviously, the impact would be huge, but what do you think the chances are of pulling it off?
It's tough. In one hand, Tony Mitchell has been recruited as long or longer than any kid we'll talk about today, right? I mean, he was committed to Tennessee before his freshman year. He was committed to Jeremy Pruitt, for those who don't remember. I mean, that's how long ago Tony Mitchell was sort of on the radar. And since the moment he backed off of Tennessee, this has been viewed as an Iron Bowl deal. However, again, think back to the timeline there. How many changes at Auburn have gone down since Tony Mitchell emerged as a recruit? So for Auburn to even have a puncher's chance is phenomenal, because Alabama's been all the same in this recruitment, right? They have stability over there. There hasn't been as much coaching turnover as we're used to in Tuscaloosa, which usually is a sign for the door opening for their recruits. Doesn't exist right now. Yet and still, on signing day, Tony Mitchell's not 1,000% done to Bama. And Auburn has made such a move here, in fact, that even the last visit, which went to Texas A&M, according to my sources in Birmingham, it's being overlooked. It's not being heavily considered. A&M's not out of it, and they'll probably have a hat on the table later today. But this is being viewed still as an Iron Bowl battle. So for Auburn to have that puncher's chance is a huge deal. Tony obviously frequented the Plains both before and after Freeze's arrival, a bunch of games on campus, an official visit on top of it. And again, Zach Etheridge, right? This is the and my source actually yesterday was unsure if Etheridge was going to stay or be retained, I should say. So that was something I know Mitchell and his camp were obviously worried about and curious about. So locking this in right before signing day and giving that clarity and stability to these DB targets still out there is huge. And again, if Mitchell pulls a shocker and picks Auburn, that will be the biggest reason why. And again, it's not done. It is not done. There is a little bit of unease in Tuscaloosa going into signing day, and that's not something we typically say. Again, like you said, with a Thompson kid, with a Birmingham kid.
Sure. All right, another one, Kayin Lee, the 4-star corner. I think this is a future NFL player. He's currently committed to Ohio State as we record this. Going into early signing day, Auburn hasn't backed off this kid either, John. And there seems to be more and more smoke that Auburn could potentially pull this off. What are you hearing? What are your thoughts? What's your gut feeling here?
Yeah, to me, this would be an even bigger deal than Mitchell. No disrespect to the in-state kid, but when you're pulling from out of state,
this kid is special.
Ohio State for a kid who was, a Georgia commit, extremely long cornerback prospect, it hits a little bit different. So this would be the bigger pull because Kayin has frequented Auburn to a degree, but not as much as Mitchell. So it would be a bigger sort of uphill climb, at least optically, for Auburn to pull this thing off. But yeah, it's quiet. He hasn't said a whole lot one way or the other, which is typically a sign in my experience that, hey, this thing has legs. So again, another Etheridge hat tip. And the rest of the staff is going to deserve some too, right? Because it's not just him. They hosted Kayin. They went out to see him at Cedar Grove recently, right before the dead period kicked in. And look, there's just at a lot of positions, there is this sense that it's a total positional overhaul. And the secondary is one of those spots where not only are you selling, hey, we need bodies, but you're selling playing time on top of it. And it's something that is going to resonate, especially with an Atlanta area kid. We always talk about this on the podcast, right? Alabama, Georgia, Florida, those metro areas, those states, those pipelines, you've got to hit no matter who you are as an Auburn coach. You've got to hit those hard. And that's where Freeze is plucking a lot of this talent from. So that would be as big a deal. I think Faulk would be the biggest deal. This would be probably the second biggest deal if this flip could be pulled off. Yeah,
we'll get to Keldrick Faulk in a second. Izavion Miller is the next one I want to bring up. John, top JUCO tackle in pretty much every ranking system that you look at, was committed to Ole Miss. Auburn now has Auburn's old Ole Miss offensive line coach with Jake Thornton. And it sounds like they've got a pretty good relationship. Your thoughts on Miller? Will he sign with Auburn today?
I think so. This one was viewed as kind of an old school. Look, he's from Mississippi battle, right? Ole Miss versus Mississippi State. Commits to Ole Miss pretty early on, and that was kind of it. And until Jake Thornton moved on from Ole Miss to Auburn, then Miller took the Mississippi State trip. Then, unfortunately, all the tragedy went down in Starkville. Yeah. After that, he gets over to Auburn, where he, of course, can reunite with Jake Thornton, who's a young, dynamic offensive line recruiter. Miller cited Thornton as one of the primary reasons he picked Ole Miss in the first place. And really, from the moment he set the Auburn visit, the Ole Miss side was expecting the decommitment for days and days on end. It finally came down, I believe, Monday morning. And really from that moment, it's felt like Auburn's race to lose. We talked about overhauling the DB position. There's an even bigger overhaul up front on the offensive line. And Auburn needs tackles. It's been the same for years on the Plains. So to bring one in with that type of size and experience, I think is going to be a really big deal. And unfortunately, a lot of question marks at Mississippi State offensively, right? We just don't know what that looks like. So it's going to slow down some of the momentum that the Bulldogs had. They've already lost an offensive line commitment going into signing day, and I think they're losing out potentially on the in-stater, Izavion Miller, who I believe is Auburn-bound.
Is he going to start year one type player? I mean, Auburn doesn't have any tackles right now, so you got to think he's got an easier path at Auburn than most places in the conference.
Yeah, I think he's got a right tackle floor too. I mean, obviously everyone's going to be gunning for that left tackle job, but he's got a right tackle floor if it doesn't work out. Just a massive human being, 6'6", well over 300 pounds, but he moves pretty well. So I think he's got a right tackle floor, worst case scenario. And again, that junior college experience is invaluable when you're making a move like this. And that's something, again, the great Auburn teams always seem to have on their roster some junior college additions, especially from the Mississippi junior college.
Yeah. All right, let's touch on that big name you just mentioned a second ago, Keldrick Faulk. What happens if Auburn pulls this off? Can Auburn pull this off? We'll talk all things Keldrick Faulk in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Alumni Hall. Look, if you looked up at the calendar and checked the date on your phone, it's like, oh my goodness, Christmas is just a few days away. I can't order anything in time. Well, if you're in the Auburn, Opelika, Lee County area, you need to head over to our friends at Alumni Hall. They've got all sorts of stuff for the Auburn fanatic in your life. If you're listening or watching the show, you know somebody that loves Auburn, and you need to bless them with all kinds of incredible things that you can find at Alumni Hall. You can still order, get things in for basketball season. Baseball season is right around the corner at alumnihall.com for you out-of-towners, but be sure to check out their stores at alumnihall.com. I hope none of my family is watching because I have been to Alumni Hall to get some things for them this Christmas. So be sure to check that out, alumnihall.com, or go to Alumni Hall. They have locations in Opelika and in Auburn. John Garcia, our guest. Let's talk about the potential biggest flip that will have every Auburn fan screaming Merry Flipmas from the top of their lungs. And as soon as they see Santa Claus this weekend, it'll feel like Santa came early. If Keldrick Faulk flips from FSU to Auburn, what does it mean for Auburn?
This is the measuring stick recruitment to watch. I know, again, all these kids are flips, it feels like, right? But this one would very much hit different, as the kids say, right? This is you talk about the problem areas for Auburn over time, both geographically under Brian Harsin and positionally. Faulk would satisfy both of those needs. You hit a massive, high upside, athletic edge rusher, and you do it close to home, right? We talk about that, the surrounding areas around Auburn and how many great players get away from Phoenix City and Montgomery and some of these other areas. Highland Home, not very far away. So that would satisfy a huge optical question mark surrounding what Hugh Freeze and company could do. And I think his timeline is interesting, right? As soon as I saw that FSU was getting the last official visit, I was like, okay, Auburn's not getting a trip. Kind of it, right? You know, he's going to stick with FSU, but he just kind of came home a little early, snuck back into Auburn on Sunday right before the dead period commenced because they needed another look. And I think that is so telling because, look, when you're another recruit who's been recruited for 2, 3, 4 years, you don't need to see campus or the new facility one more time. You've already been there and done that. Yeah. This is more about the people. This is more about Hugh Freeze. This is more about the new hires under Hugh Freeze. And it wasn't just Keldrick that needed that final view. It was Mom. And I think when that becomes a part of the equation, it's really as big an X factor as NIL could ever be, as NFL could ever be, as playing time could ever be, because now this is an opportunity to do it close to home. And look, he's a country boy. He's got a little brother who's coming up at Highland Home, and he'll be a big-time recruit in his own right. You know, there's a lot of reasons to make the argument as to why Auburn has a legitimate chance here. But at the same time, he's been committed to FSU for a very long time. And obviously their program stabilized on the field this year and looks like it's on the up and up. So I'm hearing this is a coin flip. This is incredibly close. And it's one of the first decisions I've got circled from a time perspective for later today. It's supposed to be noon Eastern, so 11 Central Time. When Keldrick comes off the board, I will be glued in because this could be as close a battle as any Auburn target that we talk about. It is true 50-50 coin flip status. I think getting to Auburn, he was leaning FSU, coming out of it cloudy. So whatever questions they needed to have answered by Freeze and company were clearly answered. And then there's 2 or 3 days of time in between there and actually signing. And that's a long time to say no, theoretically, to Mom. So I'm kind of, the more I talk about it, I'm feeling a little bit blue and orange as opposed to garnet and gold, but it is that close with Keldrick Faulk.
Yeah, I think Auburn's going to get him. So for all of the guys that we mentioned, who do you think Auburn lands? Just give me a gut feeling. Kayin Lee, where's he going?
I think he's flipping to Auburn. I think that's the big splash for AU.
Keldrick Faulk.
I'm starting to think he sticks. I don't know. It's so close.
Commit to it, John. Let's go. Just commit to it.
How about this? You'll flip either Lee or Faulk and be very happy with it. Lose out on the other one. It's almost too close to call between the two. So since I said Lee was in, I'll say Faulk is out.
What about an Isaiah Jatta? We haven't talked about him a ton, but seems like Auburn was favored, and then he went to Colorado. It was very cold and a lot of snow out there. So we'll see what happens with that.
Colorado got the last visit for like every kid that looked like he was done with School X. And then they went to Colorado last weekend. Don't know how much space there is, but Deion's going to splash here in the end. Although, again, kid wanted to play SEC ball, was committed to South Carolina, backed off. Auburn, huge need there. I think between Jatta and Miller, Auburn grabs one, if not both, of those tackles, and those could be the tackles of the future or the present, really, on the Plains.
Yeah. Does Auburn finish as a top 20 class, top 15 class? What do you think expectations should be, and what's a home run if they finish at what spot in the rankings?
I honestly think top 25 is a home run, and it looks like it would be there barring a big surprise. But even there is a home run based on where you were. And again, I think it should be brought up, holding on to some of these very key commitments. Jeremiah Cobb, most notably, J.C. Hart, we just talked about, flipping Sylvester Smith. These in-state kids on top of it, a huge deal for Auburn. So I think finishing top 25 is an absolute home run. Finishing top 15 is like, this is scary. This is going to be – that means you flipped Lee and Faulk, right? So and maybe Mitchell. I mean, this is now – scary territory, and you're like, this overhaul, this turnaround is going to happen very, very quickly, which we know is possible with high school recruiting, JUCO, and of course the portal, which we know Auburn has been attacking relentlessly. So this thing is moving really fast, and it's pretty much all positive for Auburn.
John, how can people love you, support you, and all that stuff, buddy?
A lot of signing day coverage, live blog going on right now at si.com. We'll have some final rankings at the end of the day when we can call a winner, a number one class, and we'll build it out from there. And barring a surprise, Auburn will be on that list. So check us out and come talk ball with us on Twitter at John Garcia _JR.
John Garcia, he's the best in the biz. We will be back tonight recapping Auburn basketball's game against Washington, and we will recap signing day on tomorrow's show. Don't miss any of it. This has been Locked On Auburn.